Hey everybody, welcome to episode 22 of the LitRPG Podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm ready to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This has been one of the busiest weeks for LitRPG that I've seen this entire year. 14 new releases on Amazon, that's a ton. While I'll have a list of all of them in the show notes on our site and in the show notes for this podcast, I'll only be reviewing some of them this week, and the remaining ones I'll be reviewing next week. It's just too much for me to read in those few days, unfortunately. So the books that I will be reviewing this week are On the Watch, White Plaque, Unsung Hearts, Rex's Let's Play, Gamebrick, Hardens Book 1, Tinker Tailor Giant Dwarf, Last Horizons Live, The Full of Avarice Book 1, and Veridian Gate Online Cataclysm. Those are the ones I'll be reviewing. Again, there's quite a bit more. Look in the show notes to see all the ones listed. I'll be talking about them next week though. But because we are having a large list of reviews this week, I'm going to go through that LitRPG news as soon as possible. I'm going to begin right now. Okay, LitRPG news. We have the Phantom Server box set. The wonderful sci-fi LitRPG series, The Phantom Server, is now available as a Kindle box set for only $9.99. If you bought them individually, you'd pay about $60, so this is a really good deal in my opinion. Love the series myself. It's kind of a cyberpunk sci-fi LitRPG. A lot of great cool elements in there. Enjoy the entire series myself. Next LitRPG news story is going to be about the Omegaverse, also on sale. This is actually referring to the Omegaverse Omnibus, which is the first 3 books. It's on sale for $4.99 for a limited time. So if you haven't jumped into this series yet, if you've been waiting for some reason, I don't know why you would be, but it is currently on sale and you can purchase it. It's also available on Kindle Unlimited, the Omnibus. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, go check it out there as well. The first 3 books in the Omegaverse series, they're the sci-fi side of this. Books 4 and 5 are also out currently. They are the fantasy side of this. I know, it's a switch in the same universe. It's kind of cool the way they do it. The books 1 through 3 are cool sci-fi, crafting, tons of good space battles, things like that. Good recommend for me. On sale now. Okay, Difficulty Legendary Series. Greg Harlock, author of the Difficulty Legendary Series, released book 2 this week and has already stated his intent to finish off the series next year. Very ambitious. In a post on Facebook, he stated, Difficulty Legendary Book 3 will be out early 2017 and will run approximately 500 pages. There will be 4 books in the series in total, so Janice's story will come to an end next year. Well, good luck with that, Greg. I don't know that I could predict how long my series is going to be, but you have a plan. You're executing it perfectly, apparently. You have books 1 and 2 come out this year. Books 3 and 4 you have planned already. So good on you, buddy. Good for you, and I hope the series does well. You'll get to hear my review of book 2 in a few minutes. Okay, 49ers, side up. In advance of his 49ers series coming up, author Matthew Sylvester has put up a blog that gives readers bonus content for the series. It includes some great artwork, excerpts, and thoughts from the author himself. You can find the link in our show notes, or you can look at litrpgsite.wordpress.com. Okay, on to the last bit of LitRPG news for the week. This is actually Luke Chimilenko, author of the Ascend Alliance, sponsored and wrote an article for MMORPG.com, one of the leading sources of news for game players who love MMOs. I'm personally one of them. I've visited us on a regular basis for years and years and years. It was really super exciting for me to see our genre, even if it's a sponsored article there, on the site, on the front page. Okay, additionally, Luke Chimilenko highlights the connection between MMOs, video games, and of course LitRPG. He even lists some fine examples of the work in the genre and gives some resources for people who are interested in the genre. Personally, I'm super excited and jazzed about it, and I hope more and more people read the article on MMORPG.com and, follow us down the path of LitRPG. Gnomes will always rule. Okay, on to the list of upcoming LitRPG. December 25th, Desperate Times, a 49ers LitRPG novel will be coming out. I'll be reviewing that one next week. Video Game Plotline Tester, The Dark Herbalist, on January the 3rd of 2017. And Your In-Game Lit RPG Stories from Best-Selling Authors, January 20th, 2017. That's the Russian translated short story collection. Okay, on to our new releases and reviews. First one in new releases and reviews. This is the full title of this book, On the Watch, White Plague, Through the Hordes of Heartless Killers. It might be White Plague, but it is actually spelled on the book cover White Plague, which gives you an indication of some of the issues the story might have. Okay, it is 80 pages, $1 whole dollar, not 99 cents, but an actual dollar, and it is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, this is the synopsis from the story that I read. The one that's on there isn't quite, it doesn't do it justice. Vlad, a cop, is sent to befriend the estranged daughter of an infamous criminal in a VR game called Horgar, on the off chance that she's contacted by her father. And his first quest in the game involves solving the mystery of some murderous bunny rabbits. Yep, it's a very interesting premise. Now, unfortunately, this is a translation from a Russian story, and you can seriously tell from the sentence structure that you get in the story. For example, a sample sentence: Shurovov slid his eyes, speaking, "Of course, if you want to become one day more than just a lieutenant." Yep, that's an actual line from this novel. If you can get past that, though, you actually find a really cute lit RPG murder mystery. Yep, that's a thing now. So I enjoyed it. I just ignored the grammar stuff. But if you're one of the people who can't ignore it, just skip it. It's $1. And there are a lot of other things to read this week, including The Fool of Avarice, Book 1. This is also another short read. About 30 pages. It is listed as $2.99, seriously overpriced. But it is available on Kindle Unlimited, so if you have Kindle Unlimited, that would be the only way I would recommend you reading this. For $3.30 pages, that is just really overpriced in my opinion. But this is short and sweet. I'll give you my version of the synopsis. Nick, a casino owner and lover of money, enters the VR game Welcome Online to turn in-game money into real dollars. Now, Nicholas Flamel, his gamer name, a member of the lucky Loiter's race, starts his game time off with some neat perks and discovers his luck is more useful and profitable than he thought. Again, in 30 pages, a lot of information and interesting story was set up here. I'd contacted the author, SR Novels Josh, and he said that he hadn't planned a follow-up story. It seems like this is more of a student work, but it was really interesting, and you know, for the price on Kindle Unlimited, it's not a bad read. I'd enjoyed some of the interesting game mechanics that he'd come up with, and as something of an amateur writer myself, I can appreciate that this is interesting at least. On to the next review though, Rex's Let's Play. Now, big heads up on this one, guys. There are 2 big issues on this that you should be aware of. But first, let me give you the rundown. 131 pages, $2.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, 2 big issues though. One, there's a lot of sex, like descriptive, graphic sex. So if that's a thing, if that's something you're not interested in reading about, skip this one entirely. Again, lots of stuff to read. Second point that might be of an issue for somebody. During conversations and dialogue in the story, speech is not separated, and there are no quotation marks around the dialogue portions of the story. So there's no structural way, no structural distinction between different characters speaking to each other and like descriptions of scenes, or you know, chatting, whatever. It's so it's a little confusing. My brain kind of inserted the quotation marks at some point in the story. Again, it's not particularly long, 131 pages, but it is an issue for some people. I know people have particular reading styles and they can't move past some of these structural issues. So just a heads up on that. But if you can go past that, this is actually a pretty decent lit RPG. The novel is a side story of a larger God-Maker war series. It introduces and tells the story of Rex, who loves anime and manga, especially those harem stories. And when he creates his character in the latest VR MMO, he chooses a disadvantage of a sex addiction that forces him to have sex every 24 hours or lose the use of his abilities and magic. Personally, I skip the sex scenes. It's not my thing to read in LitRPG. But the parts of it that were not sexually oriented were actually really interesting. I love the character creation process. It was really detailed about all the character options and skill options, sort of. And after that, it just shoots into the game world, and you get to the action as soon as possible. The fight scenes are well written. The magic system seems really robust within the story. It is a short read, but I had a good time when I read it. In the preface, the author does say that the main story in the Godmaker series will not be like this one, and so whether or not the author, whose name is Joseph Hamner, means that there aren't going to be sex scenes in the larger series, or that it's going to be a little more serious, we'll have to wait and see. But again, this is a fun LitRPG story if you can either ignore the sex scenes or appreciate them as an author's prerogative of writing that way. So there you go. Next on the list, Unsung Hearts. This is written by Sun Bien, Sun Bien, but they're little dots, so they're initials. It is episode 1 of the series. Now, the description on Amazon really doesn't give you any clue as to what the story is about, so I've written my own description of the story. It is 353 pages, nice long novel, for $2.99 currently, and it is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, Eversona is a VR game that can affect both social and physical state of people in the real world. Gain power and health in Eversona, and it translates to real life. Lose all your hearts in game, and you die in real life. Every year you spend in the game gets you $100,000 in real-world money. So the author goes out of his way to explain how well-connected and important it is, the virtual and the real world. Okay. Now this is a unique VR world that uses a combination of class skills and ranks to determine power. The magic system, which was one of the most fascinating things to me, is based on art, music, singing to create magical effects that relate to fire, water, fortune telling, and combat. This is one of the most unique magical systems that I've come across in LitRPG. Now, the storyline revolves around a unique bloodline skill and how its re-emergence in the game and real life has the potential to change the power structure between established factions, some of whom want to use the young boy who is manifesting these characteristics, and other people just want to kill him. And our main character's job is to protect the boy. So that's the premise and the kernel of that story in this novel. It's a really cool world. It's a really cool magic system. Unfortunately, it is all completely obscured by the poetic language that the story is written in. If you read the reviews or comment section on Amazon, there are comments about not being able to get through the first few chapters. And I was one of those people. I didn't write that, but I felt that way. It took me 4 tries over 4 days to get through the first chapter of the book because it is written in such a poetic way that it's very hard to understand. And maybe that's just my thing about not understanding poetry. But the writing style was very difficult for me to grasp, and especially combined with the way that the author describes the in-game descriptions of items and spells and character levels. It really combined to make it very, very frustrating read. Now, I actually read the entire novel, but the only way I was able to do it was to use a text-to-speech program on my phone. And kind of listen as a mechanicalized audiobook. The computer did a really good job of changing the pacing and making the words a little more understandable to me in the sentence structure. And once I got through that beginning part, the speech patterns and the writing got a little simpler. So I enjoyed it, but I do understand that most people are going to have a really hard time reading this. As a matter of fact, the first time I actually read it, I thought it was a Chinese translation of a story about an MMO. That's how confusing I thought it was. And the author, I shot him an email. He said, "No, I'm Spanish, and that's just the way I write. I used to be a poet." So that explains the writing style. Again, I like the story, the core of the story, and I like the world that it's set in. I find it very interesting and having a lot of potential. I just think execution kind of failed through. So I can't recommend it, unfortunately. But if you are interested in the kind of story and you appreciate poetry a little more than I do, I guess, I would suggest you download a sample. You'll know within minutes of reading this whether or not it's for you. And again, that's Unsung Hearts. Sorry. Okay, on to our next story review. Gamebrick, Hardens, Book 1. It is written by G.S. Hobson. Okay. It is 328 pages, $2.99. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm going to give you a short synopsis. Hayden wakes up inside a VR game with no memories of either the world outside or how he got into the game. As he explores the VR world he's in, the mystery surrounding his amnesia unfolds. There you go. That's kind of the core of it. The first few chapters were really frustrating for me. Not because they're poorly written. There are just some design elements in the story that I found inconsistent and a little bit, just like little blurs. They disrupted the flow for me a little bit. One, there are a few story inconsistencies. The author says that the main character has no memories of the outside world at all, but apparently he understands social references, cues, language constructs, artificial constructs like in-game baking or women's attitudes towards men being a certain way. And that is kind of inconsistent to me with the idea of total amnesia. I would have rather the author actually address those concepts and said, oh, yes, he has an instinctual feel for these things, or, whatever they're going to do, the author was going to do. But just at least address those kind of plot holes that popped up a little bit. Additionally, the author kind of breaks the fourth wall by defining for the reader certain in-game terms in parentheses, which is unusual to me. So things like, player killer. It'll say PK at the regular text as they're speaking between characters, but then the author will put next to PK, player killer, without any additional explanation sometimes. And by putting parentheses, it kind of felt like the author was speaking to me directly, the reader, which broke the fourth wall and some of the immersion in the story. I would much rather prefer just a parenthesis in, like a little explanation, parenthesis, or not parenthesis, but a comma, and just going with the story. But that's a choice the author made, and it just didn't really work for me. There are a few other things, but overall, I have to say that putting those little nuances aside at the beginning, the story gets a lot better once the character gets to the first beginner town and explores his class options. Once you get out of, get into some comments and adventure stuff, it gets a lot better. The story smooths out quite a bit as the author doesn't feel the need to explain gaming terms in the way that they chose to explain those gaming terms. Become a much more interesting and better story. I did recommend. I know with all those little nagging things, it's still a recommend for me. I enjoyed it, even if I was bothered by some of those things at the beginning. Okay, on to Tinker Tailor Giant Dwarf. I love the title. That's really just spot on, amazing, good title. By Greg Harlock. This is actually going to be the second book in this series. It is 368 pages, $2.99, and it is available on Kindle Unlimited. Again, second book in this series. The first book is called Difficulty Legendary, and that's also the series title. And this book actually limited a lot of the things that I didn't like about the first one. I actually didn't give the first book a recommendation because it felt so unfulfilling. It felt like a short story introduction into the world, or like it should have been part of book 2, something like that. And so I didn't really care for book 1 just because, not because it was bad writing, it just left a lot of things unfulfilled in me. Book 2 does a much better job. It's a much bigger story, almost 400 pages. The main character is a lot less whiny. There's a lot less real-world drama, and it feels like the main character actually makes progress in the story, which was a big issue for me with book 1. Janice learns about his tinkerer class skills and experiments with how they allow them to do in the game, and I loved that exploration of his character class and his ingenuity in dealing with problems that come up in the story. So much improved over book 1 in my opinion. Now there's a larger plot where Janice had some odd goals of killing the player that killed him in the first book, and that in this game world there's a permadeath system where if the player's character dies, that's it, it's done. Doesn't matter if you're level 1, 0, or 3000. If it dies, it's gone. No more coming back. And so the main character in the first book lost his first character kind of unfairly, but then as he gets a second chance in this game world, instead of going after his own goals, becoming powerful, supporting his family in the real world with game currency, he instead kind of focuses on, my big goal is to kill the guy who killed me. And that's fine. I understand there has to be a big overarching plot for the series to feel cohesive. That just felt kind of weird. Now, there's also another larger plot line of preventing the return of an evil player after his character died. Apparently, there's a mysterious way to resurrect him, which doesn't seem consistent with the other plot line, in my opinion. But that's me. The parts of the story that I really liked were the ones that had nothing to do with that larger plot. I love just reading about the main character, learning about all the things he could do in his class, leveling them up with skills, crafting, dealing with the in-game PKers, player versus player combat, or environment versus player combat, and using his skills to complete quests, fight monsters, and eventually grow more powerful. The core of what I enjoy about LitRPG are those simple things. I don't necessarily need a huge plot line of stopping Voldemort from coming back, or whatever we want to call him. But this is a recommendation for me. I enjoyed it a lot. I just didn't like the larger plot line. It felt a little forced occasionally. But that's my opinion. On to Last Horizons Live. This is 317 pages, $2.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Last Horizons series is a lit RPG with a very unique perspective. This is actually the second book in the series. The first book is called Last Horizons Beta, and this is again the sequel. Same characters. They're coming out from the beta version into the live version of the game. And again, this is a very unique perspective in this series. It's a story of a group of gray-haired gamers, retirees, getting to spend time with their friend in a virtual reality MMO, who is actually dying in real life. In the game, everyone has maximum quality of life and time dilation. They get the most time to spend with their friend who is in real life in constant pain. Now, part of the story is the normal gaming stuff. The game has gone live. These players have returned from the beta with some extra cash that they had earned completing a carnival event. And they're going into adventures, leveling up, getting skills, all that great stuff. And now the other part of the story is a little more endearing and touching to me. It's really about accepting and cherishing the time you have left at the end of your life, and really appreciating your friends and your family when you have them. There are several points in the story that were actually made me a little teary, so be aware of that. This is, as much as it is an adventure, it's also an emotional journey, and I loved it. I love when little RPG stories are different, when they make you feel things and make you think about things. I love that about literature and LitRPG especially. So this is a huge recommend for me, but I would recommend that you read the first book in the series, Last Horizons Beta, just because there's so much reference material from it, and that it'll make it a little easier to understand who all these characters are. And there are quite a few characters, what they were doing in that beta, how it affects them here, why they have enemies all of a sudden. That stuff will make a little more sense if you read Last Horizons Beta before you read Last Horizons Live. So, huge recommend for me on this one. Now, the last review, yep, we're almost there, is Veridian Gate Online Cataclysm. It is 243 pages, $3.99, and available on Kindle Unlimited. Real quickly, huge review, huge recommend for me. I do have to disclose, though, just for the sake of honesty, that the author gave me an advanced copy. J.A. Hunter gave me a nice advanced copy about a week ago, just so I would have more time to review it before it came out. Just a heads up on that. So here's my honest review of the story, though. I enjoyed it. It was really fun. If I had to describe Veridian Gate Online in one sentence, it would be a trapped in the game story with a hint of political intrigue. So it was kind of fun. The story doesn't spend much time in the real world since it's going to be destroyed by an asteroid. So all that real world stuff doesn't matter. Instead, it jumps right into Veridian Gate Online, where Jack plans to upload his mind instead of dying on Earth. When Jack, or Grim Jack, as the game character is called, logs into the game, he finds himself in a dungeon and has to escape with a sneaky thief named Cutter. Along the way, he tries to save an old woman and is set on a difficult game quest that will eventually help him establish his character class. Now, there is another plot line that involves the secret of the developers who are trying to keep from the rest of the game players, and Grimjack is helping a college friend, old girlfriend, discover what that plot is. So there is some intrigue in there, and that's the political thing I was referring to earlier. But overall, it's just a good adventure story, which is all I kind of asked from a LitRPG story. The fight scenes are memorable. The main character is interesting. I love the character class that he eventually gets. I won't spoil it. And it's interesting. In the game world, the game mechanics, the character classes aren't just cookie cutter mage, tank, thief necessarily. There are a lot of hybrid classes with unique abilities, and I like the fact that it allows for a lot of cool character customization parts of the story. So the author has a lot of variety in creating his characters potentially in the future. Having read it, I enjoyed it. The location settings weren't that descriptive for me, but it's okay. It's an adventure story about killing monsters, growing powerful. It was good. I enjoyed it. So I give Veridian Gate Online a good recommendation. I enjoyed it. And this is only half of the stuff that I had to read this week, guys. So that's it for the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It's kind of a longer episode just because we had so much to read. I had so much to review this week. So I appreciate you hanging around the entire episode. And if you're watching the podcast, I appreciate you doing so. If you want to support us any other way, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support again. And we, of course, have the huge full recommendation list on that site as well. So check that out. We have over 140 LitRPG titles. If you're looking for something new to read, or you need to figure out where the series goes and starts, we have a bunch of information there as well. But until the next time I talk to you guys and I see you and we hang out together and talk about LitRPG, I hope you enjoyed it here. Remember, though, to go read some LitRPG, okay?